Greetings and salutations, good friends. And what can I say? I am a happy guy today. You know why? Because it's here. It's here. It's been here for about a week. And at last, Ghostbusters 2016 has been in theaters for about a week now. And I couldn't be happier. Oh, no, I haven't seen it. I have no opinion on this matter about what this movie may or may not be it good or bad. Just one very simple fact. It's here. It's here, and after all these months of us expecting the worst, hoping for the best, all that, it's here. And people are seeing it. People are out there seeing it. The reviews are in, and they all say with a triumphant, I'm hearing a lot of C's, pretty much. And what can I say? From the very beginning, before the whole debate, before the whole misogyny thing came about, I always kind of figured it would turn out like this, you know? So I'm not all that surprised by the numbers, by the reviews, the critiques and all that. It pretty much came out to be exactly what I thought it was going to be. And that's, it is what it is. I would just like to say that I, for one, like I just said, am very happy that this is finally over. It will continue on, likely, for maybe another week or so, maybe. And then the movie will come out on DVD or some format thereof. And it may continue on a little bit more after some special features that say one thing or another. Probably something along the lines about, probably a callback to Paul Fieg's or Paul F. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. For that, I apologize. But probably a callback to him saying something along the lines of, I hate nerds, I hate fanboys, they're assholes. I remember him saying something along these lines, and I have not looked into looking it up. And it took me a while to come to this point of calm and happy and joy. After all this has happened, to simply say that he's kind of right. Think about this for a moment here. People who consider themselves nerds, not so much geeks, there is, depending on who you ask, there is a difference, but nerds in general, fanboys, are very picky, very emotional. But overall, I hate to admit it, but a lot of us can be considered assholes and jerks, picky, pessimistic, and all that when it comes to subjects that we feel very close and dear to our hearts. In this case, Ghostbusters. The original is an incredible movie. From beginning to end, it's got great action, great comedy, memorable characters, a pretty darn good villain, and just a joy to watch. I've met people who, young and old, have enjoyed this movie and continue to this day. And when even the mere mention of this movie, this new one comes up, Ghostbusters 2016, it is generally met with a lot of I currently work, or rather, for the moment anyway, as a checker. And just about every time it would be mentioned, it would be met with the same thing. Very minimal enthusiasm, not a lot of people excited. One lady, in fact, was actually bringing through my line the original movie because her kids, who looked to be about maybe 9 or 10 or so, love the original movie. So, of course, I asked her, so are you going to take them to go see the new one? Do you think they even want to? Her response was one of, no. Now, considering the response, I didn't really go into it further than that, but that pretty much said it all to me right there. And I hear that a lot. I hear that a lot from people bringing certain products that will have a free ticket or something like that on it. And more often than not, people will say, no, they're not going to use it. No, they're not going to go see it. And I don't care to know too much as to why, especially in a checkout line like that, because, people are coming down the line. Don't want to hold them up. But the lack of enthusiasm says it all. And to back what I was saying about Paul F's remark about fanboys and nerds, more often than not, they're very angry. Myself included. When I first heard that, I was very angry, very insulted on a personal level, because I consider myself a nerd, if you couldn't tell. So, I was ready to release a video basically, venting my frustrations and saying how he was wrong, and how dare he, and how saying something like that can actually hurt your box office numbers more than helping. And whether what he said was taken out of context or was spoken, like he was talking to a friend and someone overheard something, I don't know. The exact source, as I mentioned, I don't know. But is irrelevant when you think he's kind of right. He's also wrong, of course. It's because these people were getting so upset because they see these trailers and these other forms of marketing for this 2016 release, and they're not happy with it. They consider it an insult to the original, regardless of whoever was attached to it. And so, he felt attacked himself, so he responded to it. Now, to be fair, we all know how the internet works by now. And doing something like that doesn't exactly help your case. Excuse me. So in all fairness, it is kind of ballsy that he said it. But I still, as difficult as it is, I definitely agree with what he's saying. That, yeah, kind of jerks, kind of nerds. It just happens that way. I mean, think back to some of the other movies that have come out. More recently or more easily mentionable would be the Star Wars movies. Every time there was a new one out, people were up in arms, calling it heinous and a rape of their childhood memories and all this other jargon. And as far as that goes, I agree with a statement made by Doug Walker as Doug Walker. I don't think he said it so much as Nostalgia Critic, but saying that if something like this destroyed your childhood and you're blaming it for it, you didn't have a childhood. Because it comes down to one very simple fact. It can't. Movies like these cannot destroy your childhood. Why? Because it made you who you are to this day. And it cannot change that. Not to mention it has no bearing whatsoever on the original movies. Case in point, Ghostbusters 2016. And yes, to get this out of the way, I am one of those people who will forever refer to this movie as Ghostbusters 2016. I've seen posters and some things here or there where it seems as though they're trying to call it Ghostbusters Answer the Call. Which, if that's the case, not the best, but at least it's easier to differentiate it between the other movies, aside from the obvious. The new one. Or the one with the bridesmaids people in it, or whatever you choose to call it. At the end of the day, it's Ghostbusters 2016. In my view, as well as many others, it's Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters 2, Ghostbusters the video game, and Ghostbusters 2016. That's just how it works. Easier said, simply because this is a reboot, not a sequel, as it was made clear very early on. And I was, 50-50 on the potential of the original idea of it being a reboot/sequel when it was going to be the original crew passing the torch to a new crew. And I wouldn't have minded that. It wasn't the coolest idea, but in many respects it could have been good. But since that idea was continuing on for years and years and years, I mentioned previously I stopped caring a long time ago. I had my Ghostbusters 3 experience with the video game. And the video game, for its good and bad qualities, is an amazing game. It's a lot of fun. It's a major love letter to the Ghostbusters fandom. And it's all you need. So, when this movie came out and I knew it was going to be, what can I say? Somehow I kind of knew some of this backlash was bound to happen. The internet has almost become predictable in some respects. So none of this really surprised me, but then again, quite a few did. But nonetheless, I will say this. The movie I've been hearing has had some decent reviews. A lot of good, a lot of bad, and a lot of meh. And I will say I've heard a lot, just as many bad as good to balance it all out, as well as just as many people saying the meh. So this is a straightforward, average movie. And I gotta be honest, that does not bode well, personally. I mean, a movie that has literally been in the making for one reason or another for years, almost a decade, if not longer, and all we get is a mediocre movie? What can I say? As someone who has been on the fence about watching this movie for some time, that doesn't make me want to see it. What does make me want to see it, though, are the good points that I hear about it. Most importantly is the cast. I had my reservations about it because for one, I'm not familiar with Kate McKinnon or Leslie Jones. It's been a while since I heard the name, so I'm sorry I forgot the name. I'm not going to look it up right now. But basically the non-Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy characters, and Chris Hemsworth. Those three, Kate, Leslie, and Chris, we'll just go with that. Those three were the three that made me kind of cringe a little bit, only because I wasn't familiar with them. But everyone I've heard from who has seen this movie said that they're all great. They're all very funny, bordering on just funny. The chemistry between them all is very good, very strong, and very believable. And Chris Hemsworth, surprisingly, steals the scene in just about everyone he's in. Which is a major relief for me, because in the trailers were making him out to seem like just some dumbass. Just plain, but not in the fun way. Just as this kind of dumbass dork who was there in the background to almost play as what they expected the audience was expecting. Okay, I just heard that now, but moving on. It all came for me from that very small, albeit part in the trailer where he draws boobs on the Ghostbusters logo. And in a way, looking back on it, it kind of makes it seem as though that's how they thought the fans and people were going to react to this movie. A bit of a stretch, I'll admit. But that's kind of how it looks like looking back on it all. But, thankfully, like I said, everyone who I've heard this from, and by everyone I really mean mostly online critics, and a few read, have all said he's hilarious, everyone else is hilarious. However, with the good comes the bad and the ugly. The bad part being that this movie is basically a retread, plot point by plot point, for the original movie. And for me, that's just a no. You can't do that. They already did that with Star Wars The Force Awakens. And granted, that movie was awesome. I like that movie. That movie was awesome in many, many, many respects. But I am not naive enough to recognize that it literally is episodes 4, 5, and 6 all crammed into one movie. You'd have to be really naive and really blind and forcing yourself not to acknowledge that fact. The similarities are all over that thing. But to be fair, with something like that, that's them continuing the story, which almost makes it acceptable and forgivable. Like I said, because it's continuing the story. Whereas with this movie, Ghostbusters 2016, they're just remaking the old movie. And if it was just going to be a remake, then okay. But for me, since they're making a reboot, they're planning on making more movies. That doesn't exactly say, okay, that's fine. Now, again, it was kind of expected. I prayed and hoped it would be different, but whatever. But then for them to go so far as to even bring Stay Puft into it, and this kind of comes down to what I was saying, the bad part about this whole retread thing. If the main thing they're doing is doing what they can to remind you of the original movie, all that's gonna do is make you want to see the original. Because, like I said, there's no such thing as really raping or destroying your childhood simply because your past is infallible. Until you're Doctor Who or Doc Brown, where you can go back in time and change things, your past is your past. So, I mean, unless... Now, of course, this is coming back to the nostalgia critic Rob Walker, his brother, saying, like, unless these movies, this one in particular, Ghostbusters 84, like, held a major significance for you in your past, then that's the one real exception. But then again, you can still watch these old movies. All the old Star Wars, old Ghostbusters, both of them. I like the second one, for the record. You can watch these movies without any fear of being reminded of the new one because, I mean, for one, happened years after, and for another, it is its own unique, original sense. Probably not the best word. But then, of course, you get the new movie that all it does, basically, from what I heard, it's like almost averaging out 15 minutes of reminding you of the original. And I'm sorry, but if that really was the case, then I probably would have just walked out and said, okay, I clearly know what's going to happen, so I may as well just go see the original. With the exception of, and this is where the ugly part comes in, the villain. Across the board, all I hear is that the villain is very bland, if not completely forgettable. And that's a big bummer for me. I mean, unless that was their point, like their whole point was just to see the Ghostbusters doing their thing, fighting a myriad of different kinds of ghosts, and then you get the villain, they beat the villain, and then they move on. And then that's it. And if that's the case, it kind of sucks, really. So, like I said, I have no plans to see this new one at all. And I'm also not going to be one of those people who is expecting them to make new movies. I'm not. Because it's been my experience that just because a movie does decently well at the box office does not mean at all that there will be a next one. Case in point, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Another movie I have not seen to this day, nor do I plan to. And at this point, it almost sounds like beating a long dead horse to say that. But at this point, I don't care, because I haven't heard anything good about it. At least with Ghostbusters 2016, I've heard some good things about it. With Indiana Jones, the most I've heard was similar to this, that it's a nostalgia trip. And I'm sorry, but that's not enough for me. And of course, the whole nuking the fridge thing. I'm sorry, but after hearing about that, that's all I need to hear, really. And the whole aliens thing. I mean, granted, yeah, the original ones were more magical and mystical based, so that for them to bring in aliens isn't too far-fetched, but I don't know, something about that never set well with me. But besides all that, everyone expected for there to be another Indiana Jones, where it's like him passing the torch to Shia LaBeouf, and then he becomes the new Indiana Jones. Last time I checked, that never happened. And there were a lot of old movies way, way, way back in the day that I thought there were going to be sequels to as well, and never happened. So I will wait until I get, and even confirmation doesn't mean anything. Bare minimum, actually hearing that they're shooting it. They can confirm it and write the script forever. They already did with Ghostbusters 3, the movie. So, as far as I'm concerned, until they actually start shooting and it's locked in and all that, I'm not saying there's going to be a sequel. I'm not. Just because they're planning on it doesn't mean it. Just look at almost any video game based movie. They always plan on a sequel. Whether that's like in the contract for a video game based movie, or if they literally thought there was going to be a sequel. So, all in all, I've heard good, I've heard bad, and not enough for me to go see it myself. So I make no plans. I don't even want to see anything on my phone. I mean, every now and then I'll try to track down a scene from like Batman versus Superman. And I have to say, some of those action sequences do look good. And one day, yeah, maybe I'll see it. It took me a while, but I finally saw Man of Steel sometime last year or the year before. Essentially just before the Nostalgia Critic crossover with Angry Joe 4 came out, because I wanted to see the movie first before I saw that. So, what can I say? I forced myself to come across it and watch it, just so I could have a bearing on it. And yeah, that movie deserves every backlash it's gotten. And so does Batman vs. Superman, and so does Ghostbusters 2016. Like I said, I haven't seen any of it, and nor do I really care to. So, all that said in mind, I am basing a lot of what I'm saying off of critics. And this is kind of something I just want to tack on to the end of this video here, because I have heard from a lot of people, like, why listen to critics? Why form your own opinion just based on critics alone? Why don't you just form your own opinion and then go see it yourself? Well, last time I checked, that's what critics are there for. Since the beginning of, what's the way of saying it? Fictionalized entertainment, we'll say, which implies plays, books, movies, video games, anything along these lines, there have been critics. Hell, there have been critics for clothing, and people listen to them. So what's wrong with that? Answer me that. Answer me what's wrong with forming your opinion based on what a critic said. And you cannot count now. You cannot count now with the invention of the internet. Because guess what? Siskel and Ebert were around long before the internet, giving their opinion. And from what I heard back in the day, there were people who said, oh, well, Siskel and Ebert gave it only one thumb, so maybe I won't go see it. Or flat out said that they didn't like the movie, so they didn't see it. Now, granted, sometimes if enough critics say a movie is so bad, it piques your interest, so you want to see it and find out what the big deal is. So, okay, sure. But for me, they're paid to give their opinion. They're paid to tell you what the movie is like so that you can make a decision on whether or not you want to see it. So what's wrong with that? And even then, disbarring, I think that's the right word, that kind of thinking, we are all critics. You know that term? Oh, everyone's a critic. Is true. Because anyone who can form their own opinion is a critic. Say you're out with some friends, and your friends say they saw a movie and they didn't like it. Are you going to go see it? Probably not. If you heard enough people, both friends and just random people, they say that it's a bad movie, are you going to go see it? Definitely not. Because you'll have heard enough people say it's not a good movie, don't see it. You'll probably just give in and say, okay, I'm not going to go see it. So, what's wrong here? So all in all, Ghostbusters 2016, apparently a decent C, maybe a hard B, or an easy D, you know. Really depends on who you are, but I will say this as a final note. Please, please, do not go see this movie. Do not pay to see this movie if you just want to hate it. I have heard of people going into a movie expecting to hate it and actually liking it. I have heard of that. And if you're one of those people where that's happened, then okay. Take that gamble. But if you really just want to hate on it, please, for all of our sakes, don't do that. Simply put, you vote with your dollar, no matter what. Nowadays, studios and executives and all that, they do seem to listen to the internet. I mean, if anyone else, like Michael Bay, for all his faults, did seem to listen to some criticisms in some of his movies, which is why they made so many changes from the Transformers movies to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies. So, at the end of the day, your opinion doesn't really matter in the eyes of the executives who make these movies. Your dollar does. And if they see money going to these movies, that's all they'll care about. So if they see a movie makes money, they're just going to keep doing the same thing. Because as far as they're concerned, why fix what's not broken? So I ask you, don't do that. Please. Hollywood will only stop making these bad movies if it's clear not to. People keep paying to see these movies, they won't learn. You can bitch and whine and grime all you want, but it won't happen. If a movie is terrible, the box office numbers need to reflect that. But hey, if I have the opportunity to see this Ghostbusters 2016 movie without paying for it, yeah, I'm going to jump on it. Or maybe, like I've mentioned previously, I'll just pay for a different movie and then walk into that movie. There's a few movies out right now that would deserve my money more. Like Star Trek. Just saw that. Friggin' awesome. Maybe I'll pay for that again and then go and see Ghostbusters. I don't know. All I can say is what I said previously. No matter what, it's over. So at least kick back and relax and enjoy that fact. Because there's very likely going to be another one coming down the waves relatively soon. That's going to get everyone all hyped up again. Getting all up in arms. And before I go into that, I'm going to stop myself right there. But until then, take care of yourselves. Be as nerdy as you want to be. I know I will. And you take care of yourselves. Ooh, almost the Jerry Springer line there. I don't want to do that. But nonetheless, take it easy. Be well. Live long and prosper.